Hey there, gorgeous soul, and welcome to the Activate Your Power Kits. This is something that I have been wanting to do for a long time because there are a lot of these catchphrases and hashtags that everybody shares, and people in the spiritual community talk about this stuff all the time about reclaiming your power, or activating your power, or stepping into your power. And I know this is language that I have used quite a lot over the last couple of years for myself in my own personal practice, but also when speaking to others, when doing readings for people, when posting on Instagram. So I'm excited about doing this work this month because I think that even though there is a lot of, a lot of us who are stepping into our power, and we are really starting to understand what that really means, I also feel like let's look at what this really is. Let's look at what it really means to step into your power and how we can actually do it and not just hashtag that we're doing it, or using those catchphrases and whatever. I know there are lots of you who are in this community who are already well on the path to stepping into your power and reclaiming your power and activating your power. I think all of us are in some way or another. Anybody that has experienced an awakening of any kind, whether it's been a long, slow one like mine or a very sudden waking up, which I know a lot of people are experiencing these days. We are always on this journey to activating our power and to stepping into our power, whether it is that we're doing this work kind of for the first time and we're like, okay, I'm really just beginning to own my power, or whether you have been doing this for a really long time and you want to get to those next levels. Maybe you are ready to step into your power as a spiritual professional. Maybe you're ready to step into your power and write that book or get that promotion, or move into your leadership in whatever areas of your life. Maybe you are ready to bring in a family, or you want to be able to stand in your loving power more with the people who are close to you in your family. Whatever it is, I feel like whoever you are, wherever you're at with this power stuff, we all have more work to do, all of us, all the time. It's not going to stop ever. Not in this life, not in the next life. This is a big part of the work that we're doing here. And we have to do this work now because we have given away so much of our power in this life, in past lives, and we're going to have a look at the past life stuff. We're going to look at that a little bit in this video, but we're going to also dive into that in the meditation this month. We're going to kind of open up that past life portal and reclaim anything that we have given away, anything that has been taken from us. We live in such a strange world where we are, believe it or not, giving away our power all the time. All the time. It's being taken from us all the time. All you have to do is turn on the TV or turn on social media and look at what ads are coming towards you, and people are advertising stuff at you, trying to get you to buy stuff. People are using all sorts of tactics to try to make you step out of your power and buy something you don't need. Not that I'm saying all ads on social media are like that. I know I advertise on social media. Sometimes you might as well. But there is certainly a culture that we are in present times, in which we are constantly having people, society, the government, like all of these energies, these systems that don't want us to be in our power. So it's no surprise that we'll have power issues, right? Something that's just coming to mind, I haven't even started looking at my notes yet, but one thing that's coming to mind is beauty magazines. And I remember reading a lot of Cosmopolitan, Dolly. If you're Australian, you'll know Dolly and Cleo magazine. I read those when I was a teenager. I read a lot of Cosmo in my early 20s. And to this day, I still have things come up in my life where I'm like, why do I think that? Why do I believe that? Why do I struggle with this thing? And then it's like, oh, okay, well, I've been programmed for a really long time to have that belief, or to feel like I can't be in my power in that area of my life for some reason. So It's everywhere, it's everything. And it's our job as spiritual people, spiritual beings of light, it's our job as witches, light workers, whatever you want to call yourself, to reclaim that power and to stand in our power. And we're doing this not just for ourselves, but like with everything that we do, we're doing it for ourselves, yes. We're doing it for everybody who's around us, everybody who's in our community, our family, our friends, everybody that we speak to. And we're doing it for everybody in the collective as well. The more of us who can reclaim our power, activate our power, step into our power, the more it gives permission for other people to do the same. And the more of us that are out there being like, hey, you can step into your power, you don't have to accept this, you don't have to say yes to this, the more people are going to do this work as well. And as we know, the more of us who are doing this, the better. Okay, so let's begin. 5 minutes in. So I've kind of talked a little bit about what we're going to be doing. We're going to be really breaking down what this actually means to stand in our power. And call in our power, because I know for me, like, I started using these words, I started hearing these words, and I was like, oh yes, like this feels good, this feels like something that I need to do, something that I want to do. I want to be that person. I want to be more confident. I want to be able to step into that power energy and use that in my life. But it was not like a next day thing. It wasn't like, oh, someone told me to stand in my power and so now I can and I'm doing it and it's great. It's been a long, slow journey for me. I wasn't really going to go into a whole big thing about standing in my power in this video, but as sometimes happens, I'm getting the nudges to do that a little bit. So before I go any further, or should I add it in later? Apparently we're doing a I mean, it's always a co-creation, but usually I write notes and stick to my notes, but today we're like we're going off the notes. That's cool. Okay, I'll tell you just a little bit about my journey of my power journey, and I'm still very much on it, by the way. As with everything that we do in the circle, as with everything that I'm sharing about, I am not ever coming to this from a place of, hey, I've got it all figured out and I know how to stand in my power, so I'm going to show you how to do it. Just follow these 5 steps and you can do what I do. I don't work like that, as you probably know if this isn't the first time that we're meeting. My whole vibe is just that I think we're all on this journey and I'm just supporting you at this time. And the way that I create the content every month for the circle is really about, here's some journal prompts, here's some things that I think about, here's some things that have helped me, here's some things that I'm downloading from spirit to pass on to you to help you to be able to tune into this for yourself. This is just inspiration for you on your path. It is not me telling you how to do this, because as we know, it's different for all of us. So my experience has been an interesting one. I have never really felt like the sort of person who is powerful or in their power. Although, I feel like I'm a lot more in my power now than I used to be, and I feel like I'm getting there, and I feel like I'm going to continue on this journey. But, growing up, I was somebody who, I was pretty quiet and shy. I was very outgoing, and I love to sing and dance and all of that kind of stuff. I was really outgoing with my friends, getting into trouble, doing silly stuff. But when it came to like putting my hand up in class and asking a question, I didn't really do that sort of stuff. Hated speaking in front of people, hated asking questions or answering questions in class, hated reading out loud in class. My report cards were full of notes saying things like, Victoria does not participate in class activities. It's not that I wasn't participating, I was just participating in my own quiet way up the back, while other people were, in the front row, and they were like, oh, I think this and I think that, and I want to get up and talk about this stuff. I was much more somebody who would step back and let others take the limelight. I really started to kind of journey forward on my experience with this stuff when I became a teacher. Of course, being a teacher needs a certain level of power activation. If you want to stand up in front of a class of 30 16-year-olds, you need to have some kind of confidence to do that. So of course, I've been on this path. I have been, I went to theatre school. I had to get up and sing and act in front of people all the time. But to me, that's not necessarily the same thing as really being able to stand in your power. I know many people who are in the teaching industry who really are not in their power at all. I know many people who really struggle to step up and lead in a really powerful, loving way. There are both sides of that happening in teaching, in every industry, in every place, in every relationship. There are people who are like me, who are kind of erring on the side of, oh, I don't want to be powerful. I don't want to be in the limelight. I don't want to be a leader or anything like that. I just want to kind of, hide away and just do my thing, fly under the radar. And then there are people who are going into the sort of like other extreme where they think they're in their power and they are living their lives from this place of like confidence and authority and power, but it's not coming from the heart. And we all know people like that in our lives, right? Where it's all very old paradigm power play stuff. So I got into teaching and, I was having a lot of struggles with the people that I was working under, with middle management and management. I felt very much like I didn't have a voice in staff meetings, in decisions that were being made. And so I went on this sort of journey over a couple of years while I was teaching to really find my voice and to find my power in that way, and to be able to say, actually, this isn't okay, and I didn't agree to this, and this isn't what I want to do. And, as soon as I started to be able to do that in teaching, then, hey, I'm going to start a business. And this is a very short and condensed version of what this was really like for me. This was certainly not an overnight thing. Like I said, I'm still working on this stuff all of the time. But I have certainly come a long way from the student who would never put their hand up, didn't want to speak in class. I just was happy to fly under the radar, not get noticed, to being somebody who can show up like this, to being somebody who can teach a workshop on spiritual stuff, to having my own YouTube channel, showing up on social media in the way that I do. It has been a lot about reclaiming my power, taking back my power, standing in my power in a loving way. So that's a little bit about me, and that is very much the tip of the iceberg. I could talk to you about what has happened in my relationships in the past, how I have dealt with certain things at different points in this journey, but I want to get into the notes now. I think I may share more about my story over on the Facebook group if you're in the circle and you're in the group. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, but I also don't really want to make this video just a big story of my life. Let's get into like practical stuff that can actually be really useful and helpful for you as you move forward on your journey from here to wherever you're going. Okay, so one thing that we really want to do when we're talking about power is we want to be able to define this word. And we need to define it on our own terms and what it means to us, because for all of us it's very different. Like for me, standing in my power means it's about love. It's always coming from that place of love, from the heart center, the heart chakra, and the solar plexus combined together. I know a lot of people, and I've done this too, like when we first start getting into chakra work and energy work, it's like, oh, power is all about your solar plexus. Well, yes, it is, but the more we move forward in this 2020 energy and into these new kind of crazy levels of energy that we're working with, the more we have to realize and remember that our chakra column is not really separate. It's like looking at your physical body and saying, oh, your power comes from your hands. And we'd be like, well, you can use your hands to do something powerful, but it's not just coming from your hands, it's coming from, your whole body is a part of that. So I'm going to say the same thing is true, at least in my experience, when we're talking about the solar plexus. Yes, we're activating at the solar plexus and we are using this as the center of power, but it's all the chakras are coming to meet us there, especially the heart chakra. So for me, the definition of power, is very much connected to love. As I am somebody who writes books and runs a spiritual business, being able to activate my power and step in my power is very much connected to the work that I do. Depending on where you're at in your life and what work you do and what's important to you, your definition of power might be different. So defining it on your own terms is really everything. I'll give you a few little ideas on what I personally think power is and isn't, because we have been programmed to believe that power looks a certain way and a certain type of person is powerful and other people aren't. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges as well to reclaiming and stepping into your power. A lot of people have had negative experiences with people who are in power. And when we have those negative experiences, whether it is with a teacher, a parent, anybody that has any sort of authority over you, the government, all sorts of, there's all sorts of ways in which we can experience this. If we've had negative experiences with someone that we look at as being in power, it can be even harder for us to step into our power because we don't want to be like that. We don't want to be like those people who we've had those experiences with. So for me, power is not about having power over others. And I think that's it in a nutshell, really. Having power over others is not power. It's not power. It's not the power we're talking about here anyway. It is a certain type of power. It is very related to the ego, power plays, power struggles, the desire for like old paradigm power, the desire to have more than what everybody else does and to lord over other people. In my humble opinion, that is not true power. That's something else completely. And I don't think any of us who are in this group are really interested in that. We may at times have gone a little bit of an ego trip and get ourselves into that place where we're like, oh, I want to do this and I want this and I want to be, like this level of success and this level of power. And when we're in that place, like, go to that place, have those feelings, have those thoughts, and then work through them and see what the truth of that really is for you. Power is not speaking your truth to the crowd without letting others share theirs. This is something I see a lot, and I've had it done to me as well, in a way that was very challenging, which is a story that I've sort of shared bits and pieces of, but it involves somebody else in the spiritual community who basically ripped apart one of my blog posts, really, and at the end of it, which was basically like, you're wrong and this is wrong and this is bad and this is XYZ, all under the guise of, well, I had to speak my truth and I had to tell you you were wrong because I needed to speak my truth. To me, that's not really standing in your power. To me, standing in your power is about speaking your truth, but allowing other people to do the same. Of course, there are always times when your truth aligns with something that is just deemed as being the right thing ethically, for example. Like if you see somebody harming somebody else and you speak up and say, well, I need to speak my truth about this situation. Sometimes it's about speaking your truth. Sometimes it's just about the truth. I think it's really important that we all know the difference between that. I think everybody in this group probably does. But there are people who will use this idea of standing in their power and speaking their truth as a way to call somebody out and say that person's wrong, or to not let other people speak and share their own views and shut down conversations, by using that phrasing and that sort of language. Being in your power is not about being in your ego. And this is something that's really difficult when it comes to the power stuff, because so much of what we've learned, so much of what we've been told about power is really aligned to the ego stuff. So we are unpicking all of that and pulling it all apart, and we are stepping into our power separated from the ego stuff. We're going for the love connection of power. We're going for the true power, true spiritual power, not the ego side of that. Power is not thinking you're better than others, obviously. Power is not about taking the lead when nobody is really asking you to. This is something I see happen a lot in spiritual groups as well, where somebody pops in and they ask a question, and then someone will step up and be like, I'm going to tell you exactly what you need and why to do it and how to do it, and my way is right, and sort of just stepping in to be the leader and the teacher in a situation that hasn't really asked anybody to do that. And I'm sure you've seen that happen in your own life, whether it's in online groups or people that you work with. It's not power if you are teaching someone, telling someone what to do, giving someone advice without them asking for it. It's really not about power. That's not to say that you can't support people and inspire people, but I personally think there's a difference between being inspirational and supportive for people who are going through hard stuff or need some support and advice, versus swooping in and being the person that's telling them how to fix their life, for example. Power is not about having it all worked out. It is a journey, and it's something that we're all on the path towards. It's something that we're always going to be working on. This is my personal view on this. I think that we're always going to be working on our power stuff. What power is? For me, anyway, power is having loving and healthy boundaries with others and with ourselves. I talked a bit about this in the boundary kit. I can talk about it more in the group or in email or whatever if you need some support with this. But having power, like having those boundaries with yourself, is so important. And that's something that I've really been learning in the last couple of years, especially around how to run my business, when I'm available, when I'm not available, putting away my phone, turning off the computer, all of that stuff. That's about having boundaries with yourself as well as other people. Power is, in a nutshell, power is about having power over yourself. It's not about having power over others, about having power within yourself, having spiritual power, power over your thoughts, power over your actions and your choices. Power is deciding what kind of person you want to be and taking actions towards that. Power is about sticking to your guns no matter what, even if other people think you're, a little bit crazy or you're wrong, because that's their truth. It's about standing in your truth and speaking your truth, but allowing the space for other people to do the same. It's about holding conversations. It's about holding the space for those conversations and saying, hey, this is what I think. What do you think? And then allowing others to speak their truth and share their truth as well. And power is about supporting others, leading others, guiding others, no matter where they are in their journey. I don't think that power is about having to be further ahead than somebody else to be able to be in your power and to be able to use that power to support other people. We are all, the big part of the reason that I called this community The Circle is because we're all in this together. We're all just in this circle together. There is no podium up the front. There is no one person in this group that's like, hey, I've got it all figured out. Come follow me. It's about us supporting each other. So when we're all in our power, we're all able to support each other in like a really powerful and uplifting way. So in a nutshell, too late for that. In a nutshell, to me, power is about having power over your own energy, power over your own thoughts, and power over your own actions. And when you've got those three things working, that's when you're in your power. And as much as I've been saying, oh, it's a journey and we're all kind of, you know, on different parts of our journey and we're all just trying to get there and we're always going to those next levels. If you feel like you have power over your energy, power over your thoughts, and power over your actions, like that's it. You know, you're in your power. You've activated your power. Yes, there will be other places to go. There's still a path ahead. You're still going to be doing it more and more and more. But if you're doing those three things, then, you know, you're already doing it, basically. You're doing a pretty good job. So having power over your own energy is like this is the biggest thing that shifted for me. Like I've talked about this a billion times, so I'm not going to go into a whole thing here. But when I started to be able to realize that I could ground my energy, I could protect my energy, I could clear my own energy, it was just like, what? Like I had no idea I could do this. This is amazing. And I noticed a change like instantly. I noticed the change in everything. I noticed, and this is part, you know, where we're going next with the power of your thoughts thing. I noticed that actually I was more able to notice what was going on with my thoughts. I was able to really notice what I was letting into my energy fields. I was able to notice when I was feeling grounded and when I wasn't, and do something about it. And doing that energy work should really set me up for everything that has happened since then, which is, hey, I run a spiritual business full time. I wrote 2 novels. One was a bestseller. You know, all this stuff that I was able to do, which honestly, I was working towards some of it before I was doing the energy work. But once I started doing that energy work, gosh, it makes everything so much easier. It really does. So having power over your energy can look like your spiritual practice, what you're doing in your spiritual practice. We talked about this last month in the circle. If you haven't looked at that kit yet, or if you haven't got that kit yet, you can grab it on the shop, or you can go back and have a look at it. Your spiritual practice is everything. And you know, this is a really great way to develop your energetic power, but also to stand in your power and activate your power by saying, I'm going to do this spiritual practice, whether it is a 1-minute meditation every day, whether it is just that you sit down at your altar and you pull 1 card for yourself every day, or whether you're like me and you do a whole thing, or maybe you're, you know, maybe you're doing like 2 hours of spiritual practice every day, whatever it is. This is how you take back your power, by working on your own energy. Clearing yourself and clearing your spaces is so important when it comes to having power over your own energy. You can't have power over your own energy when you don't know what's going on with it, but you also can't really have power over your own energy when there's just like, and you know, I'm not the best example right now because I got a lot of stuff on my desk. But you know that feeling you have when you've cleaned your house and you're just like, ah, it feels so good. That's how we want to feel spiritually and energetically all the time. So that means we've got to clear ourselves and our spaces. When I was typing that came through really, really clearly. If you want to be able to step into your power, you've got to know how to clear your space. We can do a space clearing kit. Hello, okay, we'll put that on the list. Okay, grounding yourself, protecting your energy, already kind of talked about that. Working with your aura. What are you putting into your aura? What are you, you know, what's in your aura? What's happening in your auric fields? So these 3 things that I've been talking about for years, grounding, clearing, and protection, these are like the foundations. And then you've got to start asking yourself, what do I want in my auric fields? Ever since I got into Kundalini yoga a couple of years ago, that has really helped me to think about that. Like, what am I putting into my fields? What am I doing with my aura? That is a way of activating our power big time, is just like doing something with your aura, whether it's Kundalini yoga, meditation, crystals, whatever it is, but being really conscious about what's my aura look like, what's in my energetic fields, what's going on here. That is how to activate your power. Power over your thoughts. Okay, so this one I have mixed feelings about, even though I believe it's really important. I don't believe that having power over your thoughts means that you have to control your thoughts 24/7. It just, for me, that's impossible. You may know I'm a Gemini. I am like air energy up the wazoo. I'm just, up here a lot. If you'd met me before I started doing all this spiritual work, you would have, probably thought I was a little bit spacey and flighty. I still can be, of course. But I don't believe that having power over your thoughts means that you have to be changing your thoughts all the time, or that you have to be thinking in a certain way all the time. We are human, and there's so many different reasons that we can't always choose a different thought. Sometimes it's because of what's going on with our mental health. I'm somebody who has suffered with anxiety in the past. Sometimes it still comes back. Thanks, great. So I understand that being able to just be like, oh, don't think about it, or don't worry about it, or think about something else, is not always how it works. Sometimes we're in a situation that means that it's just very difficult for us to switch off and choose a different thought. Maybe something really, really tough is going on in our life, and it's not as easy as just being like, oh, just think about something else and think high vibe thoughts. I'm a big fan of noticing our thoughts and noticing our feelings, and I feel like there's so much power in the noticing. If you just notice your thoughts and you just say, yeah, I'm like thinking some really negative thoughts right now. That's interesting. That's standing in your power. Instead of being like, oh, I got to get rid of these thoughts, I got to think something else. To me, that's not actually that powerful. What is powerful is noticing your thoughts, noticing when you're going into a negative space, noticing when some thoughts are coming up that are just like not serving you in any way. If you can change them in the moment, go ahead and change them in the moment. There is a lot of power in that. If you can't change them, just be conscious of them and notice what's going on, and then come back later and think about it. Why was I so negative earlier? Like, what was that about? So noticing your thoughts, that's the first place to start with having power over your thoughts. Again, it's not about changing your thoughts, changing your brain, although there are things we can do to a point to help with that. Meditation, visualization, all of that stuff is amazing, and that certainly is stuff to bring in when we're talking about power over our thoughts. But I just really wanted to talk about the fact that it's not always as simple as that. So if you're somebody who you can't just visualize away the negative thoughts, just notice what's going on for you. And then we have power over our actions. I think that probably really speaks for itself. Having power over your actions is about choosing to speak your truth, choosing when to speak your truth. That is a big part of being in your power. There are times and places where speaking your truth is really helpful and appropriate, and there are times when it's not going to be helpful. And I've experienced this online. I think most of us have probably had a situation like this online, where we have felt very strongly that we need to speak our truth because this person doesn't know what they're talking about. And then we comment and we speak our truth and we feel really good, and then we get into like some kind of like comment war with people, and it's just like, why have I done this? They're not going to ever listen to anything I'm saying. That's an example of not really being in your power. I've experienced that myself many times. I've actually been doing really well at that over the last couple of years, and recently I noticed myself doing it again. You know, as these things come around in a spiral, and it's like, wow, why am I doing this again? Anyway, I'm choosing not to do that. um, Choosing to speak your truth as well. This is a nice little example of this. I was on a holiday with my mum, and we were going around Cornwall to see some of the ancestral sites. We went to a church where I think it was my great grandmother was baptized. And we went into this church, and it was amazing. I was having this, like, you know, amazing experience connecting with the ancestors. And we started talking to the priest that was there. My mom was just chatting away to him, and then he looked at me and he asked me what I did for a job. And I was just thinking, is this like, how do I stand in my power in this moment? I'm in a church. I'm in this man's, you know, this man's spiritual home. How appropriate is it for me to say, oh, I'm a Christian witch, and I'm like a full-time witch for a living, and I do tarot reading, and I do this and this and this. So I just said that I was a counselor and left it at that. Because it just didn't feel like the place to have that conversation. Maybe in a different moment, maybe in that same situation, if you're in a church and you're with a priest, I'm not saying you never can say that. But for me in that moment, it just didn't feel like sharing everything about what I do was really going to be helpful or useful to anybody. So I just didn't. There are other times too where I don't tell people what I do for a job, and it's not because I'm hiding. It's not because I am in fear. It's just like, you know, what's the outcome going to be here? I could potentially upset this person. I could, you know, end up in a conversation that I don't want to be in. Nobody's going to be in their power by the end of it. So, you know, there are people in my life that I don't talk to about my work, like, at all, ever. And that is, for me, a way to stand in my power. I feel like I'm in my power when I just say, hey, let's talk about other stuff. So having power over your actions as well is sometimes about walking away. Being in your power with your actions is not always about doing something. It's not always about saying something or doing something or, you know, taking an action so much as sometimes it can be like, I think the best way to stand in my power right now is to walk away from this, whether it's to walk away from a conversation, a relationship, a job situation, you know, whatever it is that is, you know, making you feel like you're not in your power. Just walking away sometimes is the most powerful thing that we can do. Power over actions, again, things like choosing to stay in our own lane versus getting caught up in what other people are doing. That's a really good way to stay in your power, is to just be like, I'm just going to focus on my own work, my own stuff, and let everybody else do what they're doing. But most of all, having power over your actions, to me personally, is about choosing love. It's about choosing the most loving action that I can in each moment. Okay. Let's see where we are with the notes. Okay, so standing in your power is about your personal power, your spiritual power. It's not about what you're doing to other people. It's not about lording over people. It's not about having power over anybody else. It's about your spiritual power. All of the spiritual work that we do, it changes us. Our spiritual work gives us strength. It gives us power. It gives us courage. It helps us to trust in ourselves and trust in the universe. What is more powerful than that? What is more powerful than trusting in yourself and believing in yourself and believing that there is a higher power that supports you in your life? It helps us stay grounded. It helps us create our powerful aura. It helps us to step into our power. This is our spiritual practice. Sometimes I think we forget that the circle is a spiritual development group. We're here to develop spiritually. And so as much as I'm like, yeah, we're talking about power this month, what we're really talking about is spiritual power. And if we go a little bit underneath that, what's under our spiritual power? It's our spiritual practice. It's about our connection. And again, you know, in a nutshell, I'm saying these like little in a nutshell things. It's like if you just listen to those, then you'll get what you need. But you know, in a nutshell, your power is about your spiritual power. It's about you believing in yourself, and it's about you believing that there is some force that has your back. And when you really believe that, and you believe that you can live the life of your dreams and you can do these things that you're feeling called to do, and you feel like you've got spiritual support behind you and guiding you forward, that's when you're in your power. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, do we really need to go into this? Let's just touch on it really briefly. What it looks like to be in your power, but to be without the spiritual tools. If you've ever seen someone try to be in their power without any kind of grounding or clearing or heart activation or protection or boundaries or anything like that, it's an interesting thing to witness. Again, you know, going back to teaching, it's just like keeps coming up as a really great example. Different kinds of teachers and how they stand up in front of a class. And there will be these really old school teachers who just stand up in front of class and they just yell at everyone. When I first saw teachers do this, I was like, I mean, I remembered it from school, but like, you know, seeing it with fresh eyes as like as a young uni, no, I wasn't even that young, but as a uni student, you know, watching teachers to have that inspiration and support of like, this is how you're supposed to teach a class. And you just see these old school teachers stepping up, just yelling at their kids, like, be quiet, do this, sit down. Like I couldn't handle that energy at all. I was just like, whoa. The kids were freaking out. They were scared. They were doing what they were told to do, but they were doing it because they were scared. And then you'd see these teachers who, you know, didn't have any control or anything of the class at all. And I was a little bit like that when I started too, although not too bad, but you know, there was some times where I was like, oh gosh, how am I going to do this? But you see those teachers who are just like, oh, come on guys, like just sit down and do your work. And it's like, oh, you're really not in your power at all. And I think they are just really good examples of like, you know, what do you want to be like? What kind of teacher do you want to be? Like, how do you want to be in your power? So my favorite way of teaching is basically just talking to kids exactly how I'm talking to you right now, and just sharing stuff. And when kids get out of line, you know, asking them to stop. And, you know, one of my favorite ways to deal with challenging students in my classes was to actually have a conversation with them and to ask them like, what's going on with you today? And some kids have like never had a teacher ask them that, especially kids who are like always sitting outside the classroom, right? So when you ask a kid that and you're like, hey, what's going on with you today? Like, what's happening? Can we talk about it? You know, a lot of them just want to talk. A lot of them just want to like tell someone what's going on. So to me, like that as a teacher, you know, that's the power you want to be in. You don't want to be the person that is just yelling and shouting at people to get them to do what you want, but you also don't want to be the teacher that just has no control and no one has any respect for you because you're not even really doing anything. When you see those people who are in their power, who are in their like ego power, and I call it ego power, but it really is kind of fear, you know, like if you are standing in front of a classroom and you're shouting at kids, where's that coming from? Like it's coming from ego, yeah, but it's also coming from fear. It's also coming from fear of like, if I don't yell at these kids and tell them to stop doing what they're doing, they might not listen to me. They might make my life complete hell. They might not do the work that I'm supposed to get them to do. They might not respect me. And there's all this fear stuff that comes up around that. I think there's a lot of fear that comes up when we are looking at our power stuff. And this is something that we will look at in the workbook as well. We're going to dive into some of our fears. Like, what's your fear about being powerful? What do you think is going to happen if you stand in your power? We have a lot of fear about it. We have a lot of fear that people won't like us if we step into our power. People will not want to be our friends. People will judge us. There's all sorts of things that come up. And this is a really important part of the work, is just like, what are we afraid of? What are our fears around this? Okay, so a really good way to start to look at what's going on with your power stuff is to ask a couple of questions. There'll be all of these questions, more questions, a million questions in the workbook. But ask yourself some questions around, like, where are the places where I don't feel powerful? Like, where do I feel like I'm not in my power in my life? Where do I feel like I am in my power in my life? Maybe you feel like you're in your power with your work, but in your relationships, you're like, am I in my power here? And then ask yourself questions like, where do others take your power from you? And where do you give your power away? And this is something that we talk about a lot in spiritual circles. We talk a lot about people taking our power, and we talk about giving our power away. But I think it's really important that we understand like the difference in energy between when people are actually actively taking it from us and when we are giving it away. A lot of the time we're giving away our power without even realizing it. And what we can do, and it's this whole like, energy vampire conversation, what we sometimes do is we start blaming everybody for taking away our power, and we say, oh, this person took my power away today, and that person took my power away, and this happened, and they were taking my power. But if we really look at it, it's like, well, maybe, one of those times somebody took your power away, but what else was happening the rest of the time? I feel like there's a lot of times where we are actually letting people take our power, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. Of course, there are always times in life where there are people who will take our power away, and that is going to happen. It does happen, but there's a lot of times where we don't need to let that happen, where we can protect ourselves and we can step out of that sort of blame game of like, oh, that person took my power. I'm not a big fan of the idea that, we always give our power away, and that actually if we protect ourselves and we have good boundaries, that's never going to happen. I think that there's just so much happening on this planet that it doesn't take very much for somebody to take your power away. It really doesn't. It can even be like, one example coming to mind for me is when someone cuts me off in traffic. That takes they take my power away like instantly. And of course there is a part of that that's about me letting them take my power away and being like, oh, well, I should just let people cut in front of me. I should just be okay with that. But I think whenever somebody is sort of like actively trying to, whenever somebody else's actions are harming others, like, I always struggle with that a lot. And I don't think that you are any less spiritual if you get upset when someone cuts you off in traffic. For me, it's not so much that they've cut me off. It's not like a personal affront. But I struggle with the idea that that person is taking away other people's power by driving dangerously and perhaps causing an accident to somebody who's just minding their own business. I think that is taking other people's power away. You might have a different view on that, and that's cool. So be honest with yourself about this. This is something to dive into in the workbook. You can do some journaling on your own, even just have a think about it. Where do you give your power away versus where do you feel like other people are taking it? And how can you navigate both of those different energies? And here's a tough one as well, and we can't talk about power without talking about this. But ask yourself, where have you perhaps taken away somebody else's power? Where have you been on the other side of that? And I think we all do it. And I think that really looking at that is really powerful, to be able to look at and own your mistakes. This is another big part of what it means to activate and stand in your power, is owning your mistakes. And being able to be the sort of person that says, yeah, I did that and that wasn't great, and I'm going to look at that and try to not do that sort of thing again. It may be, and this can happen in so many different ways, right? It doesn't have to be like huge things where you took someone's stuff or you hurt someone or whatever. although it can be as well. It could be as simple as speaking over someone who isn't finished talking, or ignoring somebody who has something that they want to say to you, or treating somebody differently because they just work at the coffee shop and you're in a hurry with your big important job. There's all these sorts of things that that we can do even without thinking about it. So having a look at doing your own shadow work around your power stuff, and where perhaps you are taking other people's power, or not, it sort of sounds like harsh to say you're taking it, because you might not be deliberately taking it, but not allowing other people to stand in their power might be a better way to phrase it. Okay, so let me see how many notes we've got. Okay, so we don't have too much more. 50 minutes. We can do it under an hour. So we're going to have a look at this in the workbook, but I just kind of wanted to touch on it quickly in the video as well, to have a look at some of the different areas of your life and what's going on with your power stuff in those different areas. Because we have talked a lot about spiritual power and your energy and all of that kind of stuff in a sort of general sense. But when we start to look at different areas of our lives, we can start to sort of look at our power in a bit more specifically, like what's really going on in these areas. One of the areas of life in which power stuff comes up the most is in our relationships. It's a big one. Boundaries is huge. Like having healthy, loving boundaries in relationships is huge in terms of being able to stand in your power in your relationships. And it works both ways. Like with everything, it works both ways. It's about you having your boundaries. It's about you respecting other people's boundaries. I see people do this fairly often, or people complain about this fairly often, where they will set up these really beautiful, healthy boundaries and be like, I don't answer my phone after this time, and I don't do this, and I'm, not available to talk after 9 p.m. or like whatever. And then they kind of don't always respect other people's boundaries. And that's something that's happened to me over the years as well in my business. We're talking about relationships, but I mean, relationships is everything, right? It's your romantic relationships, your family life, it's your relationships with the people that you work with, it's the relationships you have with people online, in communities, online groups. All of that is relationship stuff. I forgot where I was going with my story about work. Oh yes. So like sometimes I will sometimes I see people have these really great boundaries. There's a really good example, and I can't remember exactly. I must have cut cords on it really well. But there was, basically what happened was somebody asked me for like a really, really huge favor, like a work-related favor. And I said, yeah, sure, absolutely, no problem. And then later on, I asked them for a favor, and they had like boundaries, and they were like, no, I can't do that. I've really strict boundaries in place, and I won't be able to do that for you because I don't have the time or the energy, etc., etc., etc. And that was sort of like a reverse to what I'm talking about. But when we have boundaries, we can't push other people's boundaries as well. If we are asking somebody for a favor and we're saying, hey, can you do this like huge favor for me? But then we are not willing to do a huge favor like that for somebody else, then that's something to consider too. Your boundaries should ultimately be something that you are putting in place for yourself, for your own energetic protection. But when you set those boundaries for yourself, assume everybody else has those same boundaries. So if one person is like, oh, I don't answer my phone after 9 p.m., don't be calling people at midnight with your stuff, unless it's an emergency, of course, that's different. But don't be calling your friends at midnight being like, oh, I've got this problem. Think about your boundaries as everybody else has these boundaries too. and respect other people's boundaries. I feel like I'm probably preaching to the choir with this one because everybody in this group's probably already on board with all of that kind of stuff, but it's always worth thinking about. So standing in your power in your relationships, it's both ways. Again, it's about speaking your truth in relationships, but allowing that space, holding that space for other people to share theirs. And if you are not willing to, or you're not ready to allow other people to share their truth with you in your relationships, then don't be don't be showing up like, I just got to share my truth in this relationship, tell you everything because I just want to share my truth. Don't throw all that stuff at somebody and then, you know, when they say like, okay, well now I'm going to share my truth with you, it's like, oh no, I don't want to hear that. It's all about having that balance, but that is really what being in your power is about. It's about being able to say, okay, I'm going to listen to your truth, like I'm here to listen to you, what's going on, like what do you need from me that you're not getting in this relationship? What's working? What isn't working? Let's talk about this together and find a way to make this even better. So standing in your power at work is such a tricky one. And this, again, this is an area where most people have issues, you know, depending on where you work, what kind of work situation you're in. There's so many different things that can impact us at work. But I think one thing that most of us have experienced or perhaps are experiencing is having people who are above us at work, like, you know, in management or our boss or whatever, who is not in their power. That's really, really hard. It's really hard. The best thing that you can do with those people, in my experience, is to be in your power. And instead of focusing on, oh, that person's not in their power and they're so in their ego and they're doing this and that and it's all like terrible, to be in your power as much as you can and to focus on being in your own lane and to focus on being the most loving, vibrant person that you can be. Put all of that stuff in your aura, put your protection symbols in your aura, put light in your aura, make yourself so shiny that, you know, whatever's going on at work, you can handle it and you can stay in your power even if the people around you can't stay in theirs. Okay, so your power when it comes to your finances. I've got a whole course on this called Money Love, #MoneyLove. This is a really huge journey for me, getting into power with my finances. If you feel like that's an area that you really want to start to sort out this year, or whenever you're watching this, go and check out that course. I actually offer it on a sliding scale as well. So it's basically a pay what you can course. So even if, you know, you're struggling with your finances and you have loads of money to pay for it, let's have a chat and we can come up with an amount that works for you. But you know, basically a lot of the stuff that I talk about in that course is like taking back your power with your finances, really looking at, where's my money going? What am I spending my money on? What am I buying that I just don't need? I've never felt more abundant than I do now after I started doing all of this stuff. And it's not necessarily that I have more stuff or more money. I'm still wearing the same clothes from, like, if you look at my YouTube channel, you'll see this shirt in like 5 million of my videos. But it was huge for me in terms of like, what am I spending my money on? Like, what am I buying that I don't need? Just getting really conscious about you know, how I'm spending money, how I'm thinking about money, and you know, making some changes and doing that part of the standing in your power, that is the taking action and making changes. That's a huge way to get more into your power with your finances. Your home life, what's going on in your home life, the thing that they're saying really loudly is clearing your space. I don't know if there's somebody here who like really needs that message, but it's like space clearing. Let's do some space clearing. The more I'm talking about this, the more I'm feeling like a space clearing kit coming on, just to talk about like really how important it is. But you probably already know it's important. Clear your space, clear your space. That's like everything that I was saying for what's going on with your home life. Standing in our power with our spiritual path, we talked about that this whole video, is standing in your power when it comes to your wellness and looking after yourself. So stepping into your power, activating your power and saying, I need to eat better, I need to exercise, I need to rest. That is standing in your power. That is like so standing in your power. Standing in your power is not just about work or relationships and boundaries. It's also about saying, hey, I'm going to really be in my power when it comes to looking after myself in all areas. And of course, creativity as well. And there's so many different areas of your life, but these are just the ones that came to mind when I was writing my notes. But standing in your power when it comes to your creative projects, because this was really, really huge for me in terms of getting my novel done. It was like, I need to stand in my power with this. You may or may not know, but it took me 10 years to write my first novel, and I was not in my power with that. If I'd been in my power with it, I probably would have got it done a lot sooner, but also, you know, divine timing. But then I wrote my second novel in a year. So it was like the difference between, okay, I'm not really in my power with this versus I'm just going to do it because I believe in myself and I believe in this book and I believe that I can, was just like, okay, cool, it's done in a year. So when it comes to your creativity and your projects and things that you want to birth out into the world, that's a really important place to be thinking about your power and how you're standing in your power there. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about really quickly is calling back your power from all directions of time, from your past lives, the karma that you're holding, the ancestral connections that you have. This is big stuff. This is really, really big stuff. We've talked a lot about change your energy, change your thoughts, change your actions. And I feel like all that stuff can really, really help make a huge difference, actually, to a point. If you want to get to that even deeper level with your power stuff, you're going to have to look at your past lives. You're going to have to look at your imprinting from when you were a child, your ancestral stuff, what was going on with your parents, your family, the people that raised you, what goes back in your family tree in terms of like how have your ancestors been able to stand in their power? Have they not been able to stand in their power for different reasons? Many of us have ancestors who really, really struggled, who were oppressed, like all sorts of things are in our ancestral energy. Again, this is something we're going to do in the meditation. We're going to have a look at that. But this is also something for us to be thinking about and to be journaling on. And really, and I talked about this in Ancestral Healing Month, but our ancestors really do want us to be able to stand in our power, especially those ancestors that couldn't do it because they were, in situations where they just didn't have a lot of power. And that's not to say that our ancestors weren't standing in their own personal power, but a lot of the time it was a heck of a lot harder for them to be able to do that than it is for us here and now. Not that I'm saying it's that easy, but it's a lot easier for us. If you've got a spare hour to watch this video, then you're probably in a privileged position where you can do this work and you can actually really stand in your power in a lot of places in your life. Maybe not everywhere, but definitely in a lot. So working with our ancestors when we do this work, working with our ancestors when we step in our power, they are right there behind us. They want us to step into our power. They want us to experience that. They want us to do that for them as well. For all our ancestors that couldn't do this work, for all of our ancestors who couldn't do all the things that we can do, we kind of owe it to them. Not that we have to be doing anything specific, but this is an ancestor. This is the connection with this work and our ancestral healing and clearing those lines and healing those lines, ancestral lines. It's really, really huge. So these things go deep, right? It goes really deep. If you do everything, if you do all the journaling this month and you do the meditation and you're like, yeah, I'm still not feeling it, then you might have to go a bit deeper, do the meditation a couple of times, do a past life regression, really go deeper with it and see like what's really going on for you with your karmic stuff, your past life stuff, and your ancestral stuff, because it's all impacting us in a big way as well. And the more we can identify what it is, then the more we can say, okay, that's what that is. We can put things in boxes, not that we want to box them, but you know, we can say, okay, so when I'm feeling like this, it's actually ancestral stuff. It's not really my stuff to be working on. Like for example, you know, maybe you always struggle to speak up at work and you can't ever really kind of get to a place in your work where anybody wants to give you promotion because you're kind of flying under the radar. There might be something in your ancestral your path. Maybe it was you know, that your ancestors lived through a war, and for them it was all about flying under the radar and not being seen, not being heard. So there's a lot of layers to this work. There's a lot of stuff to unpack. And that's why I really wanted to talk about this and do this this topic this month, because you know, this is something that we always talk about. We're always talking about step in your power and like own your power. But as you can see from everything I've been rambling about in the last hour, there's a lot to unpack, there's a lot to uncover, there's a lot of work to do here to really be able to step into that, into our power, or into those next levels if you know you're kind of been on this path for a while. So I think that's it. I think that's it from me. I am over in the group. If you're in the circle and you're watching this in the month of February, come and chat in the circle. If you are not in the Facebook group but you need some support, you can always send me an email. And yeah, I just, you know, I'm sending you just huge waves of love and light and support as you go on this journey. And I'm really, really excited to see where it takes you. I'm just sending you so much love and light.